talk about fears. Let's talk about love. Yeah, I got fears, but I ain't got no love.
Okay, today I want to talk about the Lindsay Clancy case. Now, this has been in the news a lot lately. I heard that it is kind of a big deal on social media and stuff. And since I don't have social media anymore, I don't know. I do see it in my news feed every now and again. Um, I'm not going to do a particular deep dive yet. I think this case can be broken down into different segments, such as victimology and behavioral patterns, the greed, sex, revenge angle. All those things I think can be broken down later. But as I researched this case recently, there were some things that stood out to me. That I want to talk about. There seems to be some questions, and this kind of amazes me sometimes, but I guess human nature is just inquisitive. And it's amazing to me. There is no doubt from what I see that she obviously killed her 3 kids, but when I say that, there is doubt. I mean, because a lot of people put the blame on her husband. And I certainly would never do that unless I'm 100% sure. When I was a police officer and a detective, I was very stern on that because I've seen innocent people get accused, not convicted necessarily, although you certainly have seen that too, but just being accused of something, especially in today's day and age on social media, it ruins a person's life. Um, you know, I don't know what the husband's involvement is yet, if any. But I just want to preface it by saying this. Just think if he is completely innocent of everything that he is being accused of, even though he's not the one on trial here. He will, for always, be shamed. Going into a grocery store, people will point their fingers at him. And I just don't like that. I don't like that as human beings and as a society, especially for somebody, let's say, like him. If he is completely innocent, he has just lost 3 children. And if that isn't enough, he's being accused of taking part of that or taking the blame. And it's just my opinion that people, especially in today's true crime genre, even law enforcement, they need to stop and think about things other than themselves sometimes and think of the ramifications, of putting blame on someone or something that shouldn't be or may not be. Anyway, I digress. Lindsay Clancy, for everybody that's watching this, I'm sure they already know the story, so I don't want to get into too much of it other than she is on trial right now of murdering her 3 children. Cora, age 5. Is it Dawson, age 3, and Callan, 8 months old, and murdering them with exercise bands. It immediately gave me shades of Chris Benoit, professional wrestler who killed, I believe, his wife and 1 child, maybe 2 child, maybe 3. But it also gave me, as I researched further, it certainly gave me parallels to Susan Smith, who drowned her kids by driving them into a lake. Andrea Yates, who drowned her kids in the bathtub. And even Darlie Routier, which I've covered on this channel, who was accused of murdering her 2 children. All 3 of those cases, especially the Darlie Routier case, it invokes so much emotion in people. So much so that even I, who just, look at the facts and try to cover things, and in Darlie Routier's case, had her sister come in and on my channel and explain her side of things and of why Darlie is innocent. And I get death threats and emails on that case from people I don't even know saying, how could you have her on your channel? How could you defend so-and-so? And it just cracks me up because, first of all, I don't defend anybody, but I like to look at all perspectives. And I never said Darlie Routier was innocent. In fact, I said that the opposite. I thought she was guilty. However, after listening to Darlie Routier's sister, Danielle, explain some things that I didn't know, I had some doubt, and that's okay. I still lean towards Darlene Routier being guilty. I lean that way. Not as much as I leaned before, because there's some questions that I need answered, and I didn't see them being answered by the prosecution. So, but the killing of children evokes so much emotion from people. The Chris Benoit case, again, he's the most hated professional wrestler, obviously, because of what he did. I think of the Gray State, and I can't think of the guy who killed his child and wife. I covered that on this channel too. And I had private investigators and other people, do videos about me saying that I didn't know what I was talking about, even though they had paid me to investigate the case. And that's what I come up with, was that he was responsible. They wanted to make it into a big conspiracy. And just like any case, you can make it into a conspiracy. You can make any case you want have questions and have doubts. That's why defense attorneys have such easy jobs, in my opinion. I mean, I could be a defense attorney if I was smart enough, because all you have to do is come up with an ulterior story. Casey Anthony is a perfect example. Okay, so what is it? Jose Baez? He sits there at night and thinks, okay, I can't dispute this. How about I just say, all right, she knew about it. That's why she lied. She was protecting her father. And Kaylee drowned by accident. Okay, let's go with that. And if you explain it right, people believe it. Right? So you can do that. Everybody looks at a fact, even if it's a fact, differently. People look at evidence at a trial and interpret it 2 different ways. Not just jurors, but experts. An expert in the field. I'll give you another example. I had a case that I looked at, Jennifer Hill. And she was murdered by Kim Hubbard in the 70s. And her body was found in a cornfield. And it had been laying there for, I believe it was 8 days. And it was September, it was October. And the defense, particularly Kim Hubbard's supporters, stated the body should be way more decomposed than what it was. I'm just a detective. what do I know? I got to get experts involved. So I, at the time, reached out to the foremost expert that I knew in pathology was Werner Spitz. He looked at it and said, nope, that's consistent with the weather, time of year, decomposition, everything's normal there. Well, I report that finding, and now all of a sudden, Werner Spitz doesn't know what he's talking about because one of the defense experts said there should be more decomposition. So they're looking at the exact same thing, and they're experts, but they're coming up with different theories, different points of view. And when you have social media and you have people that look at that, they do the exact same thing. Hey, she was killed by, or the children were killed with exercise bands. A woman couldn't do that. Well, that's just not true. Lizzie Borden couldn't have killed her stepdad and mom, or stepmom and dad. She's a woman. That's what they thought back then. But we all know that's not true. So it's just like politics. You know, you can look at one certain thing and be on one side of the fence or be on the other side of the fence, even though that one thing doesn't really pertain to particular sides. Anyway, I digress. I don't want to talk about politics. Lindsay Clancy, January 24th, 2023. There's a lot of details that I want to get into in subsequent, is it subsequent? Yeah, videos that, like her body temperature, her jumping out a second-story window to commit suicide, her thoughts, her bipolarness, her psychosis, postpartum depression, all those things playing into what happened. So I always get the question, how do you become a cold case detective? Ken Mains, how did you become a cold case detective? Well, I had that in mind a long time ago, over 10 years ago. And I got the answer right here. Mastering Cold Case Investigations, a guidebook for detectives. I wrote this 550-page behemoth for that purpose. Because when I was in high school, when I was in college, and then when I became a detective, I wanted to know more about cold cases, why they go cold, why are they unsolved, is it evidence, is it lack of determination, is it perseverance, is it politics, all the above. Well, I set the answer to all those questions in my new book. It's been 10 years of research, writing, jotting down things. I knew that I was going to write this book eventually, and it finally has come to a head where I'm able to actually get it done, get it published by Unsolved No More Publishing, and get it out to you. So who's this book for? It's for detectives. It's for amateur detectives. It's for college students, academia, forensics. The topics I cover in this book, from what is a cold case, victimology, research, crime scene location, criminal profiling, conflict, greed, sex and revenge, possibilities versus probabilities. That is huge in this book. I go through that a lot because that's the basis and foundation of my methodology. Evidence, sketches. Of course, you have affirmations. Why should you listen? Social media, the rule of psychology, equivocal deaths, modus operandi, signature, legal and ethical considerations in cold cases, integrity, involving as a cold case detective, serial killers, missing persons, domestic violence, exposing myths, premeditation versus spontaneous, confidential informants, wrongly convicted, clandestine graves, you name it. I cover it in here. 550-page hardcover textbook. And along with all those topics, I also wanted to do case studies, especially case studies on confessions. Why? Because you can learn so much from confessions. At the end of the book, I go in great detail about killers in general who have confessed, why they did it, and what we can learn. That's always the most important thing, what we can learn from them and move forward and apply what we learned on that case to a future case. So I have all that. I tried to incorporate as much as I could, and there's a lot in there about real life cases that I have worked on and I have either solved or learned something from. And I'll tie that to a specific chapter, along with tips, certain things that I think you should look for in certain areas. It's a great book to learn from, but it's not just for active law enforcement members, private investigators, defense attorneys. Everybody can learn from this book. And that is what is motivated me to write this, is I want people to learn. I am tired of seeing wrongfully convicted people. I'm tired of the politics of district attorneys' offices and state police and local jurisdictions who either don't have the resources to do it or they just pass it off because they don't know how, they don't want to, they don't have the desire, the determination. And all that does is affect the victims and the victims' families. And I see it time and time again. You will see endorsements and affirmations from victims' family members in here who I've worked with in the past because they are the most important people. To pass off what I have learned to you, so you can be a great investigator, you can be a great detective, and you can solve cases just like I do. Get your copy now. I'll sign it. I'll get it out to you and start learning. That way we can start solving cold cases together. Sometimes people can't fathom certain things, like Scott Peterson murdering Lacey Peterson, his pregnant wife. They can't envision how somebody can do that to their pregnant wife. Therefore, he didn't do it. And that's just not the case. But what I try to do when I give an opinion is not convince anybody. It's not my job to convince you. I'm just telling you what I see and giving you my expert opinion. You do with it what you want. You can wipe your butt with it. And a lot of people do. But a lot of people will be like, oh, okay, I understand that now. That makes sense. So, you don't have to get all bent out of shape because I don't agree with you. The Idaho murders was a very big, eye-opening experience where I would give my opinion and people would just send me email after email telling me, that I was wrong, that it was this. Delphi, another one. I don't understand why people feel it necessary to have to voice their disagreement to me. If you disagree, then you disagree. You don't have to give me your feedback. But anyhow, I like to, and for you guys who have watched me cover cases for the past couple of years, that I like to give the analogy and compare older cases or other cases with current cases, because I think that has a big relevance in how you interpret the evidence. Meaning, this, like I said before, Lindsay Clancy case reminds me a lot of, let's just say, Andrea Yates case, where she drowned her kids in a bathtub because of her mental state. She went on trial and, she was found, I believe she was found insane, right? Or not legal. I don't know what the legal term for it was at the time, but she wasn't sentenced to prison, if my recollection's correct. Susan Smith was, and I get those two mixed up sometimes. But I think Andrea Yates went to a mental hospital. It is not, I like to stay in my lane. It is not my area of expertise to tell you about postpartum depression and how it impacts. But I like to look at other cases to see how that was impacted. Susan Smith, she's perfectly normal. So whatever her defense was at trial, I think they got it right. She murdered her kids to be with another guy. Casey Anthony murdered her daughter to be free of her. Those are just facts. Okay? So what can we take from those cases and apply it to Lindsay Clancy's case? In those other cases, at first, there was doubt of who did it. Is there a madman running loose, killing these kids? And was there a carjacker that took Susan Smith? No. Eventually, through great police work, they were able to find out who the real culprit was, and it was the mother of these children. We don't have that whodunit here, although some people are making it a whodunit. From what I see from the trial, the defense is not disputing that Lindsay killed her 3 kids and jumped out a second-story window of her home to kill herself. The internet searches, things like that, I'll get into later and see how that points you. But nobody's disputing, it seems to me, that she did this. It was her mental state that is in question, right? The prosecution is saying this is premeditated murder. And I think the defense is saying, well, wait a second. It's not. It's psychosis. It's postpartum. It's bipolar. And because of that, she shouldn't be penalized by being sent to prison. I would say that I like a whodunit case a lot more than trying to figure out somebody's mental state. Although I always like to know why, and that's why sometimes I reach out to serial killers and people who have murdered and try to figure out, okay, why did you do this? What was your childhood like? Did that have any bearing in it? You just, as a detective, and again, I go back to being just a human being that's curious. You want to know those things. So, yes, Lindsay is paralyzed now. She's in a wheelchair. She survived. And, the first red flag that I wrote down here was that of how she reportedly tried to kill herself by jumping out, a second-story window. But when you look at things just like that, okay, you're reading something and you see that, and it draws a red flag. You have to jot that red flag down, but then you can't just leave that as a red flag. You have to go and investigate that and find out, okay, is this really a red flag? Oh, wait, she talked to her husband about not leaving her because she was having all these suicidal thoughts and stuff like that. Well, okay, well then this might make sense now. Whereas initially, it doesn't make sense. But that's how you have to look at a case. Look at everything, jot down what doesn't make sense, but revisit that and try to determine why that doesn't make sense. You're not going to be able to cross them all off. There'll be some that's it'll just drive you nuts because you can't figure out. But in this case, her mental state at that time when those murders occurred, that might explain all that evidence, if that makes sense to you. So I think the next couple videos that I'll do is I might just do one. I just might do one deep dive into it, or I might break it down into just looking at different aspects of the case. The crime scene itself. What is that indicative of? It's very easy for somebody to say, oh, these exercise bands, the mom worked out, so it was easy to determine that she committed this crime. I'm not saying that happened, but I'm just saying because you already know who did it. Well, at least it seems. I mean, I'm not going to say that because I haven't investigated and I haven't researched it to the degree yet. So I still have to look at that. Hindsight's always 20/20 though. I'll look at something and it says, well, her DNA wasn't found here. His DNA wasn't found here. That means that he couldn't have done it. And that is not the case. It's always the totality of all the evidence. Okay? It would be shocking to me, but it would also be I would give a lot of respect to Lindsay Clancy if she stood up and said, you know what? I did this. I knew what I was doing. And all you guys that are trying to figure it out, you don't need to. Like Brian Koberger, he pled guilty, but now he's taking that back. Just stand up and say why you did it. I had information from some people in the know as to a motive, and I sent an email and talked a little bit with Kaylee Gonzalez Gonclave's dad about that, because everybody obviously wants to know an MO, especially a victim's family, and they deserve that. But again, I digress. This isn't about Koberger. It's about Lindsay Clancy. And did she know what she was doing, and was it premeditated? She was a delivery nurse at a hospital, but some people jump to conclusions about things like an internet search where someone asked where the carotid artery was. And as a nurse, she should definitely know that. So she didn't do that search. Again, I think sometimes you're looking too far into it. Although sometimes you have to. Yes. But a layperson should know where the carotid artery is. Right? So just because you think that a delivery nurse should know that, well, I think everybody should know that. But somebody obviously didn't if they searched that. So, anyways, it is a sad case that anybody has to go through these 3 deaths and the tearing apart of the fabric of a family. And I don't know the relationship between husband and wife here. I do know that any investigation should start, any homicide investigation. And listen, I didn't work homicides. I worked cold cases. Okay? I didn't work active homicides. But I do know that when you work an active homicide, any homicide, you look for where the conflict is first. Who had conflict with the victim? Sometimes you'll find somebody that has 10 people. Nobody liked them. Sometimes you'll find they had no enemies. But that's where you have to start. And people say, well, you got to start with who's closest. It's always the husband or wife. Well, yeah, because that's sometimes where the conflict is. So, yeah, you have to start there and work your way out. But I want to know whether, like the Hayden Pantier case that I'm going to look at, yes, it could just be an overdose, right? But there's red flags because there was conflict. There was domestic dispute calls. She had been battered at one point in time by the boyfriend who was at the house when she overdosed. So there's conflict. Now, that doesn't automatically say that that person's guilty, but I want to start there. And then, okay, we can eliminate them because of X, Y, and Z, or we cannot eliminate. But you start where there's conflict. Was there conflict between Lindsay and the husband? Were they separating? And if there was domestic dispute calls, if you talk to friends and they said they were always fighting, like the Robin Pope case, I think of that because that husband is a suspect in my eyes. Now, the answer to that could be yes to all this. They fought all the time. He was leaving her. He was cheating on her. But that doesn't make him a killer, right? That's what Scott Peterson's lawyer said. Hey, just because he was cheating on Lacey with Amber Fry, yeah, he's a despicable person, but he doesn't mean he's a killer. And I agree with that. Okay? Again, it goes back to the totality of all the evidence. If Lindsay and her husband were fighting, if he was leaving her, all those things will tie into other physical evidence if he is responsible. Is he just a bad husband? Because she said, hey, I'm going to hurt myself. I have these thoughts and don't leave me. And he leaves anyhow. Well, just because you're a bad husband or you make a bad decision doesn't mean you're a killer. He could be. I think I'll have an answer to that by the end of the week. If I can get a hold of enough research material, I'll give you my opinion on that. But again, that's just my opinion. So, Lindsay Clancy case coming up. There will be a lot more, maybe a deeper dive, maybe looking at specific parts of the trial, specific case law. And we'll go from there. We'll break it all down for you. I'm back. Feel good. And we'll get into more of this Lindsay Clancy case as we move forward. Thanks for watching. Mains out.